Maybe we'll get there. So welcome, everybody. Nice to see you all. And it's good to have you, those who are here in person, those who are joining us online. And so we're talking about a movie today from 2021 called Rose, a French film. It's uh, directed by this woman, Aurélie Sanda, who is of North African Jewish descent. So um, she was born in Paris in 1978, and this is actually, I think, her first full-length film. She's made some short films and worked on other things. And so she wrote it and directed it. She has a co-writer to help with the structure, but this is really her baby in a lot of ways. And it's, I think, a really interesting film that's been making the rounds of Jewish film festivals around the world. I don't think it had a commercial release here in the United States, but it did fairly well in France. So the movie made back its investment and made money besides. So the star of it is Francois Fabian, who is actually also a Sephardic Jewish actress, but she's been famous in France for, well, since 1967 at least, right? So, yeah. So she was in a movie directed by Louis Buñuel, Belle de Jour, back in those days, along with it was Catherine Deneuve, I think, was the star of that. So she was not only a star, she was a sex symbol in France in those days. She was beautiful, really remarkable person. And she also was in a movie called My Night at Maud's in 1969. So, by the way, that white streak in her hair is natural. She's had that since she was a child, actually. So, I read one, reviewer was like mad about her hair, and like why didn't they give her like real gray hair or something? I don't know, just a strange comment considering that's actually her hair. So. Um, so she's also a Sephardic Jew. She was born in Algiers in 1933. So, and I think we don't think too much about the connection really between France and North Africa. Maybe we think a little bit more about Spain and North Africa, Spain and Morocco. Morocco is a protectorate of Spain, and so. There's one of her pictures when she was young, but you can't show that here, right? Okay, yeah. So you can, those of you at home at least can see that I'm not kidding about her. Yeah, no. So, um, and this is not so unusual in French cinema. I mean, we have an antecedent. There you go. There was a movie some of you may remember called Madame Rosa, also about an elderly Jewish woman that the star was Simone Signoret, another beautiful French actress. So there's kind of unlike in America where actresses get a little bit older and they just sort of disappear from American screens, in French cinema, people tend to get a second life as older actresses. And so this is an example of that in the way they do things there. So so you have these folks who have this connection to Algeria, and so Algeria was a French colony essentially, and then after it achieved its independence, there was, as often happens in these cases, has happened in Morocco as well, it becomes less hospitable to Jews. And a lot of these African Jews, essentially people who were born in Africa, end up in France. And some of them become, actresses and actors and things like that. But a lot of them have ended up in kind of a permanent underclass, a lot of poverty among the African community that left Algeria and came to France. So, uh, Well, France has been on and off anti-Semitic over the years. There is some complications to that story. It's a different story than America when it comes to anti-Semitism there. Um, in America, we talk this is something a friend in France, a rabbi in France, told me. Said in America, you have freedom of religion. In France, we have freedom from religion. And so what's the difference between those two things? You've got to remember that when the French Revolution came, one of the things that, and there are multiple French revolutions because they were fighting not only against a king, but against a church, right? The established church in France, at various times in French history was in charge of everything, was something that the new Republic of France was determined would never happen again, that the church would have power. And so they believe in freedom from religion, right? That religion shouldn't have a say in what happens in French government. And consequently, every outward appearance of any faith is considered, to use a French term, to be gauche, right? So even now they have these things about, Jewish people in France are fine, but they shouldn't be wearing kippot in public. Yeah.
There's many things written on wall,
Mhm. Yeah,
stuff everywhere,
right. So saying what?
anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
There seems to be a lot of
Anti-Semitic or anti-Israel?
anti-Semitic, not anti.
yeah,
But like-
yeah. I mean, there's certainly, yeah, there are concerns, as there are here about anti-Semitism everywhere. But it is interesting that some of it is this, they're making laws against people wearing a hijab, Muslims wearing a hijab in public. And again, it's not necessarily an anti-Islamic statement when the government says that, because it's this thing of don't flaunt your religion. They don't like people wearing big crosses in public either. Right. So so it's just there's a whole sort of mix of things. It's a cultural thing that we don't, as Americans, I think, completely understand. There is some anti-Semitism. There are a lot of, among the folks who came from North Africa after Algeria it becomes independent. A lot of them are Muslims from Algeria as well, who are also caught in this sort of permanent underclass in France. And so there's a lot of hatred among immigrants of other immigrants, right? And we see that in this country, unfortunately, as well sometimes. But instead of looking up at the people who are keeping them in the permanent class, the underclass, they're fighting with each other for a slice of the pie. So there's a lot of different things going on. I guess that doesn't really have much bearing on the movie that we're seeing, but it does help put it into the context of what we see at the beginning of this movie. I think is a marriage between a Jew of North African descent, the wife, and the husband is apparently of an Ashkenazic descent, right? And so not exactly an intermarriage, but sort of. And consequently, throughout the movie, you get this sort of interesting mix of Ashkenazic and Sephardic stuff. You get Sephardic music and Ashkenazic music, and with so this begins with Rose and her husband Philippe, and it's Philippe is having a significant birthday, and they're having a big birthday party, and everybody is there singing and dancing, and um, uh, the first song is an American song with a Yiddish chorus, right? Be'mir bis du Shem, which the Andrews sisters, among others, made famous back in the 1940s, I guess, maybe even the 30s. But so that's the first thing, except it's been translated entirely into Yiddish in this version. So it's not just the chorus in Yiddish, the whole song. And then it goes into klezmer music. it's actually a wedding song, but it's there in this, for people to dance to, Hassan Kala Mazel Tov, to the bride and the groom, Mazel Tov, right? And then you hear Hava Nagila, and you see it's a big Jewish celebration in France, right? They're singing Havenu Shalom Aleichem. They're lifting up Philippe and his wife on chairs. There's a lovely little moment where they're up in the air kissing each other, right, on Philippe's birthday, you know. But at the very same time, at that birthday, um, Philippe hears about his MRI results, and uh, it's going to be uh, a an end of life decree. So, and so in the next scene, we have a different Jewish life cycle ritual going on, and that's Shiva, right? So the next thing we see is that they're covering the mirrors in the house. And they're doing that even before Philippe's body has been removed from the apartment. They're already in the process of covering the mirrors. And you notice the details when they have everybody at the house, and Shiva and the daughter is walking around with a tray of hard-boiled eggs, which is an old Jewish custom for what should be eaten at a Shiva, right? So we rarely see that in Shiva today, I think. Um, but so there's a lot of Jewish tradition in this movie, and then the rest of the movie becomes really about Rose's mourning and coming out of mourning, and her relationship with her three children, and how they treat her. And so that's really what the main story is really about, right? Is how so someone goes through mourning and becomes something else, right? So um, got a couple of lines, uh, in, since she wants to be a Yiddish singer, and then what's the one where they tell, see if I can find that, about they say to Philippe something about they're playing your song, and says that, I don't know how to tell him I hate that song. Right? That's good. But it's a movie about these relationships, and of course the children are all quite different from each other, and they all have some apparently some significant problems of their own, right? One son, the doctor, has become more traditional, more orthodox in his religious practice. On the other hand, he's engaging in an affair with someone that he sees at the Shiva, having not seen her in many, many years. You have the other son who has gotten in trouble with the law for for selling stolen goods. Right? We see that as it progresses through the movie, and then the daughter has not broken free from her marriage and her divorce. So all of them have this baggage that they're carrying, and so does Rose, but she is starting, as the movie goes on, to put down some of her baggage and to move forward into a different kind of life, which I would say goes in sort of fits and starts, and um, she gets involved with a man. I mean, but my favorite scene is probably the second scene in a restaurant where she's made this delectable pastry, right? This thing stuffed with dates. It's a North African Jewish tradition, which I don't know if you noticed, if you watched all the way through the credits, the recipe is the last thing in the credits. So I have to run it through, it's in French, so I have to run it through Google Translate to actually get uh, but yeah, this thing stuffed with dates that she makes in the movie is actually, how to do it is in the credits. So, um, but so she makes that, and then she sees that fellow from the bar with his arm around somebody else, and she ends up in a different bar sitting by herself and gets invited to a table of other people. Again, I think this may be a French thing that I think is very unlikely to happen in America, but maybe it does happen in France. And this lovely evening that this group sitting around the table has, and she brings out the thing that she's baked, and everybody gets to taste it. And they're talking about wishes and hopes, and her wishes that this evening never comes to an end. So, I think there's a lot to like about this movie. I think this is an example of something that I don't think these characters are particularly stereotyped Jews, and I like that. And I think that it's one of the things that's when we look at these movies, Jewish movies, right? Sometimes I think it's a progression that Jews have made in films, right? Where there was a time when we were happy just to be in a movie, whether it was a stereotype or not, right? And now we've gone another step, right? Which is the Jews are allowed to just be people in movies, and sometimes there's Jewish background with it. There's no real explanation of this, right? I mean, in another time period, if there was Jewish songs and Jewish dancing and all this stuff that's happening at the birthday party, and then at Shiva, there would have to be some character who doesn't know what those things are, so that they could explain to the audience what these things are, right? This movie doesn't ever say why they are covering a mirror, Yeah, I don't remember. Can you remind me? What did they say? Oh, at the funeral. Right. Yeah. Which is, yes. I didn't catch that. It was yeah. Oh, let's keep that microphone so people at home can hear it. But did you see that in the credits?
No, I know that. I just know.
Just put close to the mic and say it again.
The woman who's the rabbi at the funeral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So she's not the famous one, is she? Or there's one who's become very famous in the last 6 or 8 months, I think. So you can just rest it on the chair or something if you're not talking. So but yeah, I mean, when I'm at a funeral, I explain why we tear the ribbons and stuff too, right? So get close, get that close to your mouth like that. So yeah.
The young wrote the script about an older woman, and I actually originally thought it was with man. I thought the depiction of this older woman wasn't very accurate to render this older woman so interested in sexual activity and getting out, et cetera, because I didn't think that was very typical to go to bars and to be so motivated in that direction. I didn't think there was a tremendous amount of understanding of what most widows would be doing, especially at the age of 78. It just didn't seem to be a realistic depiction. It was written by a younger woman. I didn't think she was really seeing of older women.
I'll be very curious to what other people think about that.
Ellen,
Yes.
I don't know how old she was, but I think that good for her. And going out to the bars, and I hope, that if I were in that situation, that's what I would do.
Okay, I'm 78, and I think, wow, the last thing I'd be doing is
Yeah.
bar hopping. And
Now, I do think there is some cultural difference that we probably have to think about, what's difference about France and America. And yeah, it's not a singles bar by any means or anything like that she goes into. She goes into a restaurant. And I would say I like the way the movie depicts it. I mean, it's almost it's a spur of the moment thing for her. I mean, she doesn't go into that bar the first time to meet somebody. I mean, she's just and I know a lot of people who in America, it might be someplace different that you go to, but I know people who, if you go home to an empty apartment and you're alone, so sometimes just being in a place where life is happening is attractive for people. So she may have gone in expecting that. Um, we know that she doesn't drink, but she orders a vodka. Why does she order the vodka? Because her husband used to, it's the only drink she knows, right? Vodka with almonds. I mean, who orders that? I mean, it's uh, so I think it's it made so there's some cultural difference there, but I'd love to hear what other people think.
In just studies. They say in many nursing homes, one of the combined activities between men and women is to have sex together. I don't think that disappears as one gets older. Maybe it does for some people.
I have to say I've read that the growth of sexually transmitted diseases in this country is very high among the older generation, right? So, so, but I think we can, certainly have different opinions, but I sort of like the way the movie sort of moves her into that space, sort of, and I've also certainly known people over the years who, make some mistakes because they haven't been on the dating scene for however many years. And so to sort of fall into a moment with a bartender, it may not be the wisest choice, right, for her. I don't think any of us looking at this movie are thinking, oh my gosh, look at them. They found true love all over again. That's not really the idea there, right? But it does help to awaken her to life again, right? And so those things that may turn out to be mistakes in a certain sense are also learning experiences and things that are worth it in the long run. I'm sorry? Right. Same as young people. Everybody makes mistakes, right? When it comes to relationships and things like that. We also know that having a few glasses of vodka with apricot juice, lower your inhibitions and, um, you know, so, uh, but I do like, I think the dialogue to me feels pretty natural. I don't know if you guys had the subtitles themselves were difficult in this movie, but I think they were,
I thought they were god awful.
yeah.
I know French,
Mhm.
no, it was awful.
Right, right. It was almost like it was a sentence late all the way through, right? So it was like, yeah, right, right. Did other folks have trouble with that? Think that's, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Ellen? That's-
Well, I had the great fortune to live in France, live in Paris
Mhm.
for us several years after college.
Oh.
And at that time, I didn't have a sense of my Jewish identity, so I didn't seek out any of these areas or arrondissements or whatever in France. But I've become just passionate about the Sephardim and the North African, just the Jews from the diaspora in all manifestations. So I enjoyed this thoroughly because I do speak French, and it wasn't like my night at Maud's where it's all, a very intellectual conversation. A lot of it is just conversing.
Mhm.
And it really does add when you know the language.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't translate everything, how they translate, of course, adds its own interpretation. But I couldn't really relate to her Rose because she was such a traditional kind of wife, and Myself, I've traveled by myself, all over the world, Asia, Africa, Europe, before I was even married, and, we keep a very active life, and her life was very, very, just interior and inward, just focused around the family unit, and that small community. And there's a part of that that I find very, kind of intriguing, and the part of me that would like to be that, like, just with my family all the time. That's very sweet about that. But she had a very sheltered life. And so I think that for most of us, when we become widows, we've lived a full life. We have our own friends, maybe our own hobbies, our own whatevers. And so I think our experience is very different. Than hers in some, kind of literal ways, but I think underneath, there's that same kind of redefining and realigning with, with who are you now? Now that somebody asked her, who are you or what are you? And she just blurted out, I'm a widow.
Yeah.
That's your whole new identity and place in the world.
I think a lot of people do feel that. I would say I would not set her up to be a universal character, right? I mean, and again, that's one of the things I like about this, and this as a Jewish movie, because too often in the past, every Jewish character has to stand in for all Jews, right? And that's the way it was in movies that had Jewish characters, right? And they had to explain to the non-Jewish audience who they were and what they believed and things like that. And this is a person, right? Not, she's not an archetype. She's not the universal Jewish mother or wife or widow or whatever. I mean, she is just her. And so in that sense, I think it's a kind of a maturing of Jewish roles in movies when you see films like this. There aren't that many even now, right? So, here and there. And so we want to hold those up and point them out and say they didn't have to explain everything to the audience. It's if people want to find out why they're covering the mirrors, they can look it up. Ask AI, it'll tell you why they're covering the mirrors, whatever that is, right? Unashamedly using songs with Hebrew lyrics throughout the movie, without, anything. If you were in France and you weren't watching it with subtitles, you wouldn't even know what the songs were saying, right? I think some of them had some translation, I think, or I can't even remember now, or was I just listening? Because in the bar, there's a Hebrew song that the bartender plays, and something about the moon and the stars. It's a love song, it's romantic. Um, so um, so I think instead of seeing it as like it has to be symbolic of everybody, it's just Rose. It's just her, right? And I do think the name Rose, which of course is a good traditional Jewish name. There's lots of Jewish roses out there, Razel in Yiddish, Um, but there's a symbolic element to that name, right? Is a flower that, opens up. And as the movie goes on, she reopens, in a sense, and in a way, she's ready to move on past things that her children are definitely not ready for her to do, but they're not ready to do. They haven't opened, right? So she describes them in the bar to the bartender. It's about her three children. One is still stuck on her ex-husband. One veered Orthodox. And the third acts like he's married to me, right? He's trying to control her at home, when she can go out and where and all that kind of stuff. So, and yet, of course, they are not, you know, they are very troubled, her kids, they all have their issues, right? So, there's not a lot of social commentary, I don't think, in this movie, but there is this moment, I like, there's a lot of things I like in this movie. I like the scene where she's at the spa, getting a spa treatment, and her son is at the courthouse. So on the one hand, she's relaxing and he's getting more and more tense, not knowing what's going to come, for him. And she's getting, it's sort of symbolically, it's part of what opens her up, right? Is the physical touch and the relaxation that comes from the spa. But if there's any social commentary here, it's as someone says early on, he's not going to get any jail time because he's white, right? And that's indeed what happens. He gets 3 months of a suspended prison sentence. So for selling stolen property. Um, but I think we see in all of these children, they're all sort of in contrast to her. They're very tight, right? They're getting more and more tension in their lives, and she is releasing tension. So, and gradually getting to where she wants to be. Um, so what else did you guys see? What did you think?
Like the end.
Yeah, it's what about?
She went,
That wasn't the end,
oh, is that-
but that happened when she drives,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
again, another example of her opening up, right? That she gets in the car and goes and picks up her friend who works in a kosher restaurant somewhere and takes her for a drive, right? And it's yeah, very symbolic of, I think she said she hadn't driven in 40 years. Didn't she say that? Yeah, I know. Right. Well, look, I mean, she got in the car. She wasn't sure how to turn on the lights or do anything, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you see a lot of Mercedes in Israel, and there's some reason for that. One is the main one is that Mercedes paid a lot of reparations to Israel going back to the 1950s by way of, the entire bus line in Israel was Mercedes. I'm not sure if all the buses are still Mercedes or not, but they all, when I first went to Israel in 1972 and I was back in 74 and 82, you never saw a bus that wasn't a Mercedes in Israel. And that's all from reparations payments. But of course, Mercedes represents luxury. It represents that here, and I think it probably does in France too. So it's a sign that, her husband was successful and she's got the ability to lead a life, right? She's not going to be stuck on some minimum pension or something like that. So I think that's part of it. But so she's going out in style, right? She's not just going out. And
Jewish woman. I mean, except for the scenes where she's cooking and dancing. I mean, relevant to any elderly person, any widow.
and I think
The shiva, the funeral, they're sitting near a showmare. It's all very traditional. The guy in the kippah, Shabbat,
right, they have a Shabbat dinner and sing Shalom Aleichem and do blessings. But I think in a way you're talking to my point about it, that she is just a human being who happens to be Jewish, right? Instead of being a Jewish, right? So that's the distinction I'm trying to make about these movies. Yes, you're right. This could have been a movie about an Arab widow of a certain age, right? And it would have all different customs, right? As Vanessa says, there are plenty of the Jewish customs are in the movie, but you could make this movie about an entirely different woman from a different faith background with all sorts of other rituals in it, and it would be this, it would be essentially the same movie.
we can relate to this movie.
Right. I hope so. I think that's the intention certainly of the director, right? Is that this is a person, right, that you can relate to. Okay. You may relate to her in the way of saying, well, that's not what I would do, you know, but you still relate to the character as a human character, and that's great. A movie that we haven't actually shown in any of our film series that some of you probably remember, though, is the one by Barry Levinson, Avalon, right? Avalon. So it's a story. It is an old movie. It's about an extended family. They immigrate to the United States, and the grandfather, and then the generations that come after, and sort of the how the extended family sort of splits up into small nuclear units and things like that over time. And it's a Jewish family. But in that movie, the holidays they celebrate are 4th of July and Thanksgiving. They do it over and over in the course of the movie. And they never explicitly talk about being Jewish. I think there's a couple of Yiddish words that are thrown in here or there. It's the only hint, really. Nobody's wearing a kippah. Nobody's going to synagogue. Nobody talks about the high holy days. None of that stuff happens in that movie. I haven't watched it in a while. I may have forgotten a couple of more specific references, but I have actually spoken to people about this movie over the years, and who, like a friend from a Greek family, he said, "I thought they were Greek." Said to me, I've had other people tell me, "I thought they were Italian," right? And that's one of the beauties of that movie, is that I think it is a Jewish movie, but maybe only Jews know that it's a Jewish movie, right? Now, this one I think is more Jewish than that. I think you'd be hard pressed to watch the movie and not realize after the movie that all these characters are Jews, but nevertheless, they're human beings doing what human beings do. They're not perfect people, that's for sure, which is also kind of a sign of, there was a time when, we watched Gentleman's Agreement from 1947. That was one of the first movies I think we watched in our film group several years ago now. And the director of that movie, who by the way was Greek, Ilya Kazan, said afterwards it was one of his least favorite movies that he directed. He said it seemed to him like those people never went to the bathroom, right? And that was his comment about it. And there's something to that. I mean, the Jewish character in that movie has to be a perfect human being. John Garfield plays the part in that movie, and he's a war hero. I mean, there's just no room for him to be fully dimensionally human. Yeah. Gregory Peck is the star. He's pretending to be Jewish. His Jewish friend, right? His Jewish friend who enlightens him about what it's like to buy a house and stuff when you're Jewish, is John Garfield, who was Jewish. So what else? Other things you saw? Other thoughts about the film?
Yeah.
Elaine?
Yeah. There were some things about the Shiva and the funeral, which I didn't understand. Was the body on the floor and they were sleeping next to him before they removed the body out of the house? I didn't quite understand that part.
There was, yeah, so there was what's called a shomer, a guard. There's a tradition not to leave a body alone, from death till burial. So I think that's probably what you saw. I may have missed that detail, actually. I saw them taking the body out at some point in there, when they were already covering the mirrors and all of those kinds of things. But so I don't think anyone was sleeping, but there would be someone in with the body for, every minute until the body's removed.
Okay. And there were, maybe that was it, but I remember saying that there were some Orthodox things that I was not familiar with
Right.
about the burial. I knew about the mirrors and the tearing of the clothes, but
Mhm.
I don't know if there was anything else.
Not that I recall offhand. I mean, there's the hard-boiled eggs at the Shiva. Um, that's all I really remember.
Okay.
Else catch any other details?
About it. It was very traditional with the family, it seems, and then they had a woman rabbi. And
Yeah.
those two things don't jive.
Yeah, well, except for the situation that we run into all the time here is that the child of a member has become more traditional than the rest of the family, and right, so things get done more traditionally because of that child who's making some plans and things like that. So I think there are things like that. I'd also say that Reform Judaism in America and Reform Judaism in France, Reform Judaism in France is much more traditional. Think of our friend Tom Cohen.
It was still a woman.
Yes, but
Just said.
So Reform women rabbis in France are doing things that are more traditional than we're doing here in America, right? When it comes to funeral liturgy and stuff. So rituals and liturgy.
Yeah.
Go to Israel,
Yes.
because it wasn't safe in France.
And a lot of them have come back to France. A lot of them have come. So again, these numbers about French Jews leaving France and going to Israel, there's a lot of misrepresentation, I think, in some of this. Yeah, a lot of them are wealthy people who bought apartments in Israel, and they go to Israel for the summer, for the winter rather, and then come back to France for the summer, right? So there's we have trouble thinking about that because we don't realize how close things in Europe are to Israel,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I used to go on these trips with JUF before COVID, where they would take a group of rabbis to Europe to some place that JUF was doing something. So Rome or Paris or whatever. And we'd get there and then we would go to Israel for Shabbat, right? So we would be in Rome all week in meetings and touring and stuff like that. Get on a plane, go to Israel so we could spend Shabbat in Israel. And then on Sunday, we'd hear about some of the things JUF was involved with in Israel, and then we would come home. But America is so big, right? Who just told me this story that um, can't remember, right? But this woman who lives here, but she's from Europe. She got a call from her nephew. He had just landed in Seattle. Could she pick him up? uh, you know, right? We take for granted, how big this country is, and don't realize how close Europe and Israel are to each other. So I think that so a lot of these folks who are going from Paris to Israel, they're upper class folks who can afford to buy fancy apartments in Israel. They're not very well loved in Israel these days because they're causing the prices of real estate to skyrocket and then leaving these apartments empty for half the year. And people who actually live in Israel can't afford it. And of course, when there's a war or something like that, they'll say, "Well, we'll stay in Paris till it's over," right? So they're not really, yeah, and so they're hedging their bets, I guess you might say, in terms of what's going on in France and what's going on in Israel. But the idea that Jews are leaving France en masse for Israel is a misnomer. We also can't discount the fact that in France, there's always been a lot more push to actually, for young people to actually go to Israel and make Aliyah to Israel than we have in America. So regardless of anti-Semitism or anything else that goes on in Paris, there's always going to be more Jews leaving France for Israel than leaving the US for Israel. I think there probably is, but that's not new actually either. I'm because this is some of what happens when you have you have colonies in North Africa, and then you have to absorb people who come from there, right? When the colony becomes free, and this is sort of like America bringing the folks who helped us in Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq into our country, right? So there's a lot of immigration from North Africa. By the way, I just mentioned you guys nothing to do with the movie, but I was in interfaith iftar dinner the other night at the mosque in Libertyville, and so I sat down to talk to a guy and meet him, and he is a retired gastroenterologist. And then a guy came over and sat down next to him, and I started talking to that guy too, and he's a retired internist. And then a third guy came over and joined him, and he is an orthopedic surgeon, right? And so I just say our image of what the Islamic community might be is not that they're all doctors, right? But everybody who came in and sat down next to me at this table, they're all doctors, right? And so I finally said to the third guy, is everybody in the congregation a doctor? He said, no, that guy's a lawyer. He pointed out all these, so it's they fit very nicely into the northern suburbs of Chicago. So yeah.
Jewish mother, my son the doctor, my son the lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go and go.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I love dancing. Dancing secrets.
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah. 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 All of the dancing, and this movie is not quite a musical, although it could be adapted into a musical, I think, pretty neatly, right? And because there's a lot of music in this movie, and the music is very evocative of setting and scene all the way through, right? So, um, I think that yeah, there's a lot of in this movie, and the cinematography and stuff. It's beautiful, right? It's beautiful to watch. It's choreographed. It's lovely, So I that we should talk about the actual ending for a minute. What did you guys think about the ending? That was kind of interesting, right? Remember the last scene?
Yes.
So, right. So when she's talking to her three children, and she finishes a sentence and the screen goes black, right? That's it. Yeah. Yeah. What did you think? So
She's saying, you don't like it when I don't take care of myself, you don't like it when I'm, out and about the town, but if it makes you uncomfortable, if it makes you unhappy, then I'll stop. And then the last sentence that she says in French is, mais j'ai pas envie, but I don't want to.
okay. I think our translator gave it to us as I won't like it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Did I write that down?
Universal. You really think
But
that children of widows don't really want their mothers to, number one, date? They're not interested to change. If they lost their father, they want their mothers to.
how
Their parents, well, people going out and dating and having another life, that's a huge transition. Well, my own mother, she fell in love and her boyfriend moved in with her at 85. And we were thrilled. I was thrilled. I love you guys are liberal and wonderful, but I don't know if that's typical of black children. All I can say is we were so happy for her, Because there's also other issues. There's other issues of mistakes and money and kids get nuts on all kinds of issues.
Right. There's no question. There's a lot of that, but
To see there's money involved and then kids go really.
right,
crazy.
right. So could you translate that last? So would,
Shape, I have no desire.
yeah, right. And our subtitle said, but I don't want to. It's close. It's close. But I,
Lot they did translate.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we go through this all the time in tourist study, and
right.
I mean, I was just so happy that, I can participate because I really don't know Hebrew, but we do this all the time, and that is the translators, it's like an anthropologist. You're not just an observer. You enter into the text and you insert yourself into it,
Yeah.
consciously or unconsciously.
So I can't say how literal the subtitles were, but she has a line there where she says, "It scares me too, and I like it." Right? Which is beautiful, right? I mean, you grow from doing something new. You grow from trying something, and so she is deliberately going out of her comfort zone, right? And the rose is opening. Sense. Um, uh, but so we don't really get to see how the kids react to that last line, right? We go to black because what we want to see is her opening, right? It's not what comes next isn't really germane to the discussion. So, this is, if it bothers you, I'll stop, but I don't want to. Black.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's and it's very different than a lot of things that we've seen, right? Which it's one of the things I you know Sally Ann and I go to the movies. I have some pretty standard things that I don't like. I don't like voiceover narration in movies. If the movie needs a narrator, somebody's made a mistake, right? As far as I'm concerned.
Will Errol be with the narrator?
Well,
Thompson and she.
Yeah, she becomes part of it. That's different when that happens, and so that can be clever using that's using a fake narrator, right? The narrator is actually a character, you just don't realize it yet, right? So that can be great. But if the movie uses a narrator, it's because they have not figured out a way to show you, on screen what the narrator is telling you. I mean, I just watched a movie that's nominated for the Best Picture Oscar. It's like listening to a book on tape. Train Dreams. Train.
Train dream.
Rain. Train Dreams. There's so much narration, which probably comes directly from the book that the movie is based on. And the writing itself in the book is beautiful, and it was probably a great read. But the amount of narration in that movie, because they couldn't figure out how to show you what the narrator tells you, is a mistake. Yeah.
Fun enough.
Right. But I mean, I'm sure that the book is beautiful and the movie in its way is beautiful, but a narrator like that is almost always a failure. Right. There's a couple of interesting places when people break that and it's different. Sunset Boulevard, if you remember, Sunset Boulevard is narrated by the murder victim. So he's dead and he's narrating. I like that one. That's playing with it too, right? But generally speaking, narration is a problem. But so the other thing is I often say to Shelley is that movie had 3 endings, right? It had an ending and then they kept going. And then they ended it again, they kept going. And, so knowing when it's the end of your story is actually a talent. And so I think she's a filmmaker to watch. I mean, we'll see what comes next for her. And hope she gets a chance to stretch out and do some other stuff. So I'll have to watch for her. Orally Sada, Saada. So keep an eye out and see what her next film project might be. I suspect this one is pretty personal. She is born in Paris, but from an African Jewish family. So I think there might be some family detail in here, perhaps. It's certainly a milieu she knows, so it'll be interesting to see what she does next. So I guess we have to stop. So thank you all. Thanks for being with us for 6 movies. If you have suggestions of other films for a next go round, please send me an email or send one to Vanessa and we'll start looking. There are still several other movies I'd like to show you, but they're not really available on any streaming service. So I'm always keeping an eye out for some of those, so that we'll see if we can, if they ever become available, we'll jump on it and we'll do something about them. So I didn't even mention why I paired it with the last one, but I think if you remember the Shabbat dinner scene in the last movie we watched and the Shabbat dinner scene in this movie, those are worth comparing and contrasting with each other. So take care, everybody. We'll see you soon, I hope. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah. For adult enrichment, but on March 8th, we have ACLU will be here. Lots of bagels at 12:30, program at 1. If you have any questions, give me a ring. Bye-bye.